Yes. So welcome everybody. This is a webinar where we're going to be hearing from Howard, who's a rice farmer from Malawi. He's come to the UK during Fairtrade Fortnight. We're lucky that he's brought the weather with him. Normally when Fairtrade Fortnight is in February and March, we don't get such nice weather. So I hope he's enjoyed himself this time. I'm going to hand you over to Tracy, who will lead the session.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you. Huge thanks to BAFS for hosting this and doing lots of the admin and so on. Oh, I see somebody's got a bag of rice in their hand. Brilliant. I am Tracy Mitchell. I am the Managing Director at True Origin, and I'm just going to see if it works for me to share my presentation. Let's see if we can get that working. Last week we had a little bit of problems getting it actually to show as a slideshow, but are you seeing that okay? Joanna, can you give me a thumbs up?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So yeah, this is the second of two sessions. We did initially aim this one specifically at Fairtrade shops and members of BAFTS, and last week's one for stallholders and campaigners and supporters. Conscious that a few people didn't make it last week and so on, we decided to open this up. It will have a slightly different focus from last week. I'm going to talk less about stallholding and sort of offers and so on that relate to stallholders. If you want to know more about that at the end, we can certainly cover it. Given that it is a glorious evening where I am, and we don't get very many of those in just outside Glasgow, we're not going to draw this out longer than need be. However, we also do want to hear properly from Howard, and I'm not going to sort of rush it. If you do need to leave at any point, feel free. So very roughly, I'm going to do a short update on True Origin. I am going to make that shorter than last week. So if you want to know more about True Origin, ask later or head over to our website or our social media. We will then have the conversation with Howard in two parts. We'll do the first bit talking more about rice trading and the buying of rice from Malawi and the difference that makes. And the second part will be more about capacity building and a bigger focus on climate change. And when I say break, that doesn't mean you can go away for 10 minutes and get a cup of tea and so on. It just means we're going to watch a short bit of video footage and break the conversation up slightly at that point. And then I am going to do a very quick plug for our seasonal range, and then we'll have a bit of discussion. Yeah, I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity to talk to you on Zoom. I know when we planned Howard's visit, we were really aware that even though he's here for 3 weeks and has spent time in England as well as Scotland, lots of people would not get an opportunity to see and interact with Howard face to face. Can I just reiterate, if you can put your mute on, that would be helpful. So hopefully this is a great opportunity for you to interact with Howard. I have met Howard on a number of occasions, and I always learn something and always find it inspirational. I really hope you will too. So just a brief update on True Origin before we get into the conversation on rice. Some of you will have been ordering from us since we got started in 2009, with our first container of rice arriving just in time for Fairtrade Fortnight that year. At that point, we were known as Just Trading Scotland. Some of you will have first come across us when we were known as JTS, obviously an abbreviation for Just Trading Scotland, but we changed our name to JTS quite a few years ago. Some of you will only have come across us since we've been True Origin. And whilst in the UK we are celebrating 30 years of fair trade this year, we are proud to be celebrating 15 years of successfully trading fairly, and we look forward to a future which brings fair trade to an even wider audience. Throughout our 15 years, we have had a real focus on working with and buying from disadvantaged producer groups, providing dignity through trade for our producer partners. 3 years ago, we began a process of rebranding with the key objective of growing our business so that we could increase our purchases from our producer partners. As JTS, we certainly weren't well known. We had a real mixture of packaging, didn't create any sense of an overall range, and we were really struggling to grow. Over the course of several months, we spent time trying to articulate what we stood for as an organisation, both the trading business, the bit that I work for, and the charity. And then we set to work on our new brand. We worked with our producer partners, and it took almost 2 years from those first discussions to launching our new website, our new shops, and our new social media last September. So we're now 3 years on from those early conversations. And we launched last September to coincide with the arrival of new products in the new branding. And as well as a new name and new product packaging, both of which are definitely important, we reviewed our vision, mission, and value statements and invested energy in communicating much more clearly about our business, our products, and our partners. We did this in conjunction with our parent charity, previously known as the Balmoral Trust and now known as True Origin Partnerships. And increased collaboration with our parent charity continues to reap dividends for our producer partners. Capacity building work continues in Malawi, Eswatini, South Africa, and Kenya through a number of small grants and ongoing projects. And just to give you a little feel for the difference that rebranding has made, some of you will have seen this photo on our social media last week. This is Nicola at the Specialty Food Show in London. We were aiming to introduce our producer partners' amazing products to a whole new audience so that we can actually grow our purchases. This is her looking quite excited about having actually finished setting up the stand. And we think, and I hope you'll agree, that the products now look really good together on a shelf. So over to the main point of the evening. Let me introduce Howard. As I've said, we've met on several occasions as he's visited Scotland over the years. I am going to stop screen sharing so that you can see a bit more of Howard, hopefully. So Howard, just to get us started, could you tell us about your farm and what you grow there?
As you know, in Malawi, we live in extended families. So at my home, we live the six of us, my wife, my mother, and my son and his wife plus 2 children. So we have land. We have 2 acres of land where we grow a variety of crops, such as the Kilombero rice, other varieties of rice. We also grow cassava, maize corn, sweet potatoes. We have fruit trees like mangoes, oranges, pawpaws, guavas, bananas. These are the crops which you can find around my home.
Fabulous. Just to hear about the variety is really good. Can you tell us a bit about growing Kilombero rice? What's involved in growing Kilombero rice?
Kilombero rice is a crop which requires hard work, and it requires a lot of water. It is a crop that takes about not less than 5 months to be harvested. So there's a lot of hard work which has to be put into the growing of Kilombero, because it takes a long time to be produced.
So I think when you've spoken before, you've talked a little bit about some of the timings involved in that. I seem to remember there being like getting up at some ridiculously early time of day to go and work in the fields, because that's when it's a little bit cooler and reasonable. I can't remember what time you have said, but can you describe a typical day in your farm?
a typical day especially days which we go to work on our farms would be start around the season, rain season starts around December 10 to December 20. That's when we expect normal rainfall to come. And during this time, usually the temperatures are above 28 to maybe 38 degrees. So because it's very hot, we have to wake up at around 3 a.m., especially when we are working on the field with the animals. Because when it comes to around, starting from around 8 to 9, it starts to be very hot. So if a normal farmer and a hardworking farmer has to wake up around 3 a.m. to go to the field.
So I remember from, I think it was maybe when Webster was here and he was talking about it, that 3 a.m. work in the field for 4, 5, 6 hours, and then go home for some food. I seem to remember there wasn't any sort of breakfast or anything before you go out to the fields. Is that right?
It's you people here who think about breakfast before going to do any work. And everywhere where you meet, you have cups of coffees, tea, chocolate, and that. That is a nightmare in our community. A farmer has to wake up on empty bellies on around 3 o'clock and expect to find the first meal between 11 and 12. So if you have some rest between 11 and 12 o'clock, maybe at 1:30, you have to go back to the field after having the first meal. And then you come back from the field between 4 and 5. You have your supper, you go to sleep. Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about the sort of the season? So you talked about planting in December. When does it then get harvested? Is it May, June time?
Around from May to June, you are harvesting.
And can you tell us what happens between those two dates? I remember stories of hand weeding and that sort of thing.
In a normal season, when you have just transplanted your seedlings to the main field, it will take about a month. You have to start weeding. In a normal season, you have very normal flow of water on the field. If you have a normal flow of water on the field, of course, it helps because it also reduces the amount of weed which can grow when there is less water. Because you have enough water which is not submerging the seedlings, but for the weeds to grow underwater, it is difficult. So you have a minimum weeds. So you have to go after a month or so onto a field to start weeding. You weed for about 2-3 weeks, then you leave your crop in very, it will be looking very clean. If there are no more weeds growing, it means you will have to be going to your field to check on whether there is enough water or not. Or if your neighbor has got little water in his plot, so you can go and open the gaps to share the water which is in your field. So that's how we do it. And then during this process, it means the rice is growing. And in a normal season, it grows very fast when the water levels are not decreasing to have the rice to dry. Yeah.
But I remember hearing in terms of the weeding that we could compare it a little bit with the idea of hand weeding something like 2 football pitches worth of crop, and then going back and doing it again. And if you just think about the effort involved in down on your hands and knees weeding the equivalent of 2 football pitches, I think that, and then just remember that you're doing it at 3 o'clock in the morning onwards in the sort of heat that Howard's been talking about. Howard, you keep talking about in a normal season, and I think there's something that we will probably need to pick up on there in terms of climate change. I'm guessing that a normal season doesn't happen too often these days, and Maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the impacts of climate change. We are going to show that same video footage that I showed last week if I can. So we'll come on and see that in a minute. But if you can just talk about the sorts of things that climate change has meant to you as farmers.
I'm happy that you noted that I keep on saying that in a normal season, because there are some seasons which are not normal. When you expect the rains to come from around 10th December or up to 20th December, in a season which is not normal, you can have rains maybe mid-January. So it means the season is already being shortened because of climate change issues. Then you can find that when rains come, you can have rains maybe for 2 weeks, which means within the 2 weeks, we are hard workers. We can prepare our land. We can put down the grains for on nursery beds, and the nursery can germinate into seedlings. If the rains continue, we can even transplant. But because it is not a normal season, you can find that after transplanting, you can either have floods or dry spells. So when we have these two things, we have a very negative impact. Of course, if you have flooding water, which is not washing away your crops and soil, maybe for 2 days, there is not much destruction to the crop. But sometimes you can have floods which will wash away the crop. So if it washes away the crop, it is difficult for you to go and restart sowing the rice grains for the nursery to be replanted because the season will have been shortened. If we have a prolonged dry spell, it's the same. The crop which is on the field will be destroyed because it will die. There's no water. And when the rains come, you cannot go back and start planting Kilombero. The story is the same, the season is shortened. So that's why I always say, you all talk about climate change. All around the world, people talk about climate change, but some of you talk about climate change because you see effects on the screens, in the books, on TV, but ourselves, we feel it physically.
And I think you've said previously that growing up and through most of your adult life, you could predict almost to the day when the rains would come and so on. And now that just isn't the case. Is that right?
Yes, you are very right. Nowadays, we have the meteorological departments. They do predict, but their predictions are not helpful to farmers because they can tell you this season, the rains will start on 21st January. It's good we know around 21st January we'll have the rains, but as a Kilombero rice farmer, you already know that will this be a normal season? If I plant from around 21st January, will this rain season continue to around June while the soil is still wet to give me a good harvest? Those are the things that we start thinking about when we hear from the meteorological department. While in the past, there was no issue of meteorological department, but we could know that we'll have rains in December.
Yeah. Can you tell us anything about the relationship that you've had over the last 15 years with JTS and now True Origin, and what difference that's made to you and to your community?
First of all, I must say it here that this partnership has brought about many differences to the community, because in the past, not many farmers knew about use of small tractors like rotavators, but now we have 2 rotavators which we are able to use to fasten the work on the fields. And in the past, amongst maybe 400 farmers, maybe only 2 or 3 would be all would have ox cards. But this time, because of this partnership, I can tell you out of the 5,000 farmers that we are in the association, at least 195 farmers have ox cards, which came from the projects which we did with the Tracy's company. And we thank you, Tracy, for the partnership. And the other thing
I think you've said something about how much how much Kasfa has grown as well. Is that right?
Yes.
So Kasfa is the small farmers association, not that small farmers association that grows the rice that we buy. We actually buy it from NASFAM, which is the National Association. Can you explain a little bit more about the way Kasfa and NASFAM and the clubs and so on, how that all works?
We are in a very good working structure. For one to become a Kasfa member or for one to become a NASFAM member across the country, you have to be a member of a club where you come from. No matter what, whether you are growing chilies, beans, soya, or sunflower, you have to be a member of a club if you are going to be a NASFAM member. So clubs register with the association. In this case, all clubs in Karonga register with the Kaporo Smallholder Farmers Association. And because Kaporo Smallholder Farmers Association is under NASFAM, which is a farmer-owned organization. NASFAM is a farmer-owned organization. So because of that, NASFAM has the duty to provide funds to its associations to buy produce from the farmers. So during marketing season, Kasfa will sit down, which was not happening in the past. We'll sit down with NASCOMEX, which is the business arm of NASFAM, to discuss price issues. So after discussion, we agree, and these days, because of this partnership, our discussions not even take long because they are fair trade oriented. So after discussions, we tell the farmers this year we are going to buy, let's say, at 700 kwacha per kg. The NASFAM will send funds to Kasfa management. So Kasfa management, with the employees of Kasfa, will go out to the marketing action centers to organize markets and buy the produce from the farmers. So when we buy the produce using money we get from NASFAM, when NASCOMEX come to get the rice from us, they buy. So despite being given the money from NASFAM, Kasfa still makes profit after milling and selling the rice to NASCOMEX. Yeah.
So the money's passed on from NASCOMEX to Kasfa and then to the farmers, so that the farmers actually get paid at the point of selling the rice rather than once it's been processed and so on further down the chain. What sorts of things have happened in Karonga as a result of selling the rice through Fairtrade for the last 15 years?
As a result of selling rice through the association, what we have seen is at least most farmers who are under Kaporo Smallholder Farmers Association are able to send their children to community day secondary schools, which are not very expensive, which was not the case in the past, where we only sold to vendors. And most of the farmers, if not all, are taught how to make budgets. So what we do is we teach our farmers how to make budgets so that when they sell their produce, they already know what they need for the money which they get from their sales, which was not like that. And it is not still like that with many farmers who are not members of the organization. There are a lot of improvements. We didn't know about certified seed in the past, but now because of this partnership, we know about certified seed, and farmers get at least a better yield, because if you use certified seed to grow your crop, it produces better than recycling the seed.
Okay, I think we'll maybe take the wee break there and try and show the video if I can get it to work. And then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about climate change. Sorry, my daughter's just leaving to go to Rangers. So I just need to say goodbye. So she's gone. And talk a bit about some of the capacity development work as well. So I'm just going to see if I can get this to work. Videos and Zoom and me don't always work, so bear with me, please, folks. Joanna, I can't see you at the moment, but can you tell me if that's working?
Which is very negative to the production of crops.
Yes, it is.
In the farmers. From where I'm standing, if you look at the riverbank, this riverbank, some 8 days ago, was about, this time it would be very close to me, but this time it's about 25 meters away from me, which means the water has managed through its force to carry away some 22 meters of land. So if you can see on top of the riverbank, we have cassava, which means about 22 meters of the cassava field has been washed away. That side is the rice. Some 22 meters, it's even more from here if we talk about rice. Some 22 meters of rice fields have been washed away. And if you closely look all around the caved, riverbank, the rice has been washed away. So what it means is already the farmer is expecting very low production because most of the rice has gone, and the farmer is expecting hunger in the households because the alternative foods which we eat instead of rice, which are cassava and maize, have been washed away. So we didn't expect this, and we cannot control it. This is the negative impact of climate change we are experiencing this year. From what we have learned is that all these floods are because of deforestation, which has been very common up here. Farmers who have no money, farmers who depend on cutting trees for charcoal, have destroyed the hills. The hills have become plain, no trees. So because of that, like in our case as Kapos Motor Farmers Association, and in my case as Howard Msukwa, we are trying to bring in an alternative to cutting trees. But it's not very safe. So we've just made 2 groups which have started producing briquettes. So we are looking at it as an alternative. If we can intensify the production of briquettes as an alternative to cutting trees, which means maybe in 15 years' time or so, we can see trees coming back on the hills, and then you can see how the rains would be, the water from the rains would be controlled as it comes out from the hills. But at this time, the water just flows very fast because the hills have no trees. So probably that is the only alternative. The other thing is, what I've talked about is the irrigation on the production side. Those many farmers who can afford are going for irrigation because after floods, in many flatlands, the water leaves a lot of water because on the ground because the water table comes up. So those who can manage will always go for irrigation and produce winter rice. So that's the only way we can help ourselves. Otherwise, it is very difficult for most of the smallholder farmers.
I mean, I don't know, some of you will have already seen that video because it was produced for the BAF's conference back in May. I don't know about you, but when I first saw it, I was really quite like, it made me stop in my tracks, if I'm honest, just seeing the amount of field that had been lost due to flooding. And that was just one set of flooding. I mean, I don't know how many times something like that has happened. And to lose that much of your field that's already got rice or other products that you're eating, because the rice is generally a cash crop, isn't it, Howard? And the other products are things you're growing for yourself. Yeah, I don't know how other people found that and how good the quality was for you to watch, but it really hit me when I first saw it, which is why I was keen to show it again tonight. Howard, there was quite a feature in there about deforestation and then about the briquettes. Could you talk to us a little bit more about Grace's briquette project and what the briquettes are made of and how that project is going?
The briquettes are made of rice hussks. When the rice is milled, we have the remainings, which we call the hussks. So we found out that we can use these rice husks and maize stalks to make the briquettes. So far, as you have seen in the video, production have started, and there is demand for the briquettes. The problem
But the briquettes are used as instead of wood for fuel for cooking. Is that right?
Yes. If you know charcoal is black and the briquettes are black. So what we want is for people to stop cutting trees to burn the trees for charcoal, to use the briquettes. But at the moment, the ladies are able to make the briquettes as we have seen in the video. The only problem is that the machines which we bought are small, and the compression which they do on the material that we use to make the briquettes is not enough. We need to scale up the business by sourcing new big machines so that we can scale up the business. But otherwise, for most people who have tried the briquettes that have been made, they've recommended them to be very nice for cooking, including the recent one is a lady from here called Kate. I think she knows Joyce. When she came over, she's still in Malawi, in fact. When she came over to visit, I took her to Grace's place. We had a chat with her, and at the end of the visit, she bought a 50 kg bag of briquettes.
Wow.
I did it deliberately to make her buy some briquettes so that she could go and try them and then send a report here. So she sent a report to Joyce saying they were very nice, and she said that they cook faster than the normal charcoal.
That's brilliant. I mean, this idea for the project, as I understand it, came from Grace, one of the women rice farmers, and it's been very much a women's empowerment project. And the two groups of women are in the process, I think, of setting up cooperatives. Is that right, Howard? And yes, trying to set up businesses to make and then sell the briquettes. It's been a difficult project that True Origin Partnerships have been sort of I guess, fundraising for, but then like obviously most of the work has clearly happened in Malawi with Grace and the teams out there. It's taken a long time. There's been all sorts of challenges, I guess, to overcome in terms of getting them connected to the electricity supply and so on. It's absolutely fabulous that this is, I guess, now a pilot that proves that it works. And what we need to go on and do now is help you with like bigger machines, finding bigger machines, and hopefully having more centres where this can happen. Because we also needed to do stuff, I think, in terms of creating the buildings. I think the buildings had to be made from scratch. Is that right, Howard?
Yes. The buildings were made from scratch. There were nothing. The ladies had to source land from the scratch where we put up the buildings. But
I think it's a really good example of quite a small project from a UK development project's point of view that's having quite a big impact and could have an even bigger impact if we can scale it up properly. Could you tell us a little bit about the sort of revolving fund that's happened on the likes of ox carts?
As you remember, Trace, we got funding through the Scottish government to provide 50 ox carts to 50 farmers. But as an association, we said, no, we can't just give out ox carts to 50 farmers. We should make it something like a revolving fund. So it became a project. So what we are doing is, by then an ox cart was costing 150,000 Malawi kwacha. So what we did was we contracted someone who made 50 ox carts. And then we told the farmers to pay 50,000 kwacha and collect the ox cart. So after the first consignment of the first ox carts were made and were collected, which means we had 50 times 50,000 kwacha. So what we did was to get the amount which was paid by the farmers, put it back to the one who was making the ox carts, so that he can make us more ox carts. It is very encouraging even to me, because instead of just making 50 ox carts, we have ended up giving out ox carts to 195 farmers. It was supposed to be a project which could be continuing, but because of the prices, the cost of materials to make the ox carts, we stopped after we had made 195 ox carts.
Still almost 4 times as many as was originally anticipated in the project. So that's brilliant. Can you talk a little bit about becoming a WFTO member? Some people on the call, I guess possibly most people on the call, will be aware of the World Fair Trade Organization. And as a business, we went through the process of becoming WFTO accredited in 2020, which was a bit of a challenge. Our audit was done completely online with everybody in separate rooms, obviously, and so on. And we have renewed that a couple of times since. But I think I was amazed how much was involved from a UK business point of view in trying to become a guaranteed WFTO member. And I am really encouraged that Kasfa has been able to do the same in Malawi. Can you tell us anything about that process or what's happened as a result of being WFTO members yourselves?
It is a very encouraging development for Kasfa to become a WFTO member. We are, of course, the first ever member of WFTO in Malawi, because how do we know this? When you were in the process of registration, we could not find any grouping in Malawi, in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, where we could go and learn how it is done.
Mhm.
That's why we were forced to go all the way from Malawi to Tanzania in Arusha, which is about 2,000 kilometers away from us in Tanzania. So after learning in Tanzania, that's when we came and started the paperwork of the WFTO membership. And the other thing is, because of being members of WFTO, we have learned a lot. We didn't know as an association that there are policies which are not actually related to the production of rice, but which help the association to grow. Like one, because you are WFTO members, we know we are not to be abusing our children during the production of rice. And we take it further. We're a very gender sensitive association because we know the principles of WFTO. So it has brought us a lot of awareness on how to do the business. If you are talking about seed multiplication, it's because we now understand the importance of being a fair trade member on quality and standards. While in the past, we couldn't even talk about fair trade, we couldn't talk about quality standards. They were none of our business. So this time, we are a transformed association.
I think some of you will be aware that as we are on this call now, the World Fair Trade Organization has its biennial summit going on in South Africa, in Cape Town. And a couple of folk from True Origin are there representing us. But Masanwi, who used to be the Kasfa business manager, is now working with True Origin Partnerships just on one of the committees, and he's now in Cape Town learning more about WFTO and how that process works. He's not actually with Kasfa or NASFAM anymore, as I understand it, but is still involved in terms of giving us advice on things like the Briquette project, but also on things that will help hopefully help Kasfa maintain their WFTO status. I think possibly the last thing I'd like just to talk about before we open up for questions, Howard, is the irrigation pumps. I think you've talked about the challenges of having enough water and not having too much water and so on. Am I right that when there's been poor harvests, the people that have had pumps have managed to have a slightly less poor harvest? I mean, and it's still not great, but it's a lot better if you've got an irrigation pump. Is that right?
Yes, especially when you have droughts.
Yes.
If you have droughts, it is not felt by people who have got irrigation pumps because they can easily get water and put on the fields. Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the pumps have been supplied through grants from True Origin Partnerships, is that right? And we're looking, I think, at researching solar-powered pumps in the future.
Maybe I'll be doing myself wrong if I say some of the pumps, because it's almost all the pumps have been supplied because of the partnership with True Origin. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think there's also been, I remember Mary, who is the chair of True Origin's board, she went out to Malawi a long time ago now, and I think as a result of that and conversations she had when she was out there with some of the female farmers, there was also ox carts, no, plows it was, wasn't it? Plows that we fundraised for particularly for some of the women farmers, I think.
Yeah, I was just talking to the projects committee of True Origin today that I think when I go back, I need to come up with, tell the management to come up with the list of the women who have benefited from the, because there are quite a number of them. I think more close to 70 now who have benefited from the PROUS project, because the plows project, what we do is, from the beginning, when we started, the plow was around 50,000 kwacha each. So the women would come with 25,000. We give her a plow. Then the following season, she will finish the 25,000. Now the plow is at 120,000.
Wow.
So yeah, so because of that, we are not again able to continue because the funds are a little. But it has been a project which has been going on very well. We did it deliberately to target women because it was Mary who discussed with the female farmers. So even if it is Howard who wants to have a plow, he should go through the wife. So that's how it works.
I think one of the final things I'd just like to comment on is I think I'm right in saying that before we started buying rice and working with you on the other aspects of the business and the capacity development work, am I right that Kasfa had about 1,000 members? Is that right? Earlier, like 15 something years ago, and now has more like 5,000. Is that?
We had before we started working with you, we were about 1,500. Then when we started working with you, the number grew up to 9,000. So
9,000. Wow.
9,000. So management was difficult. So when we sat down, we started reducing the numbers and stabilized on 5,000. So we are 5,000 members, and we don't want to increase to bring in more. But what we are doing is, at first, we were two associations, Kaporo North and the Kaporo South associations. So what we are doing is, if we want to bring in more members, we should put them under a new association, because we will then employ a new association field officer to look after that association.
Yeah.
Today
so
now,
you need the
associations.
infrastructure to deal with a bigger organization that you don't have at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm just very quickly going to mention the 90 kilo challenge. I'm guessing that lots of people on the call will be aware of the 90 kilo challenge, but I was, I guess, slightly surprised last week that wasn't the case. So it's worth just making sure people do know. When John Riches, who was the founder of Just Trading Scotland, went out to Malawi in 2007-8 time, one of the conversations he had with a farmer at that point was about the difference that selling an amount of rice would make. And I guess fast forward a bit, we had a container of rice, as I've mentioned at the beginning, on the seas and on its way to us, just about arrived in time for Fairtrade Fortnight 2009. And like quite a lot of people on the call, at the time I was a fair trader, as well as starting to get involved in JTS at that point. I ran a stall at the back of my church, and like lots of you, I'm very used to eating up out of date, and my husband is very used to eating up out of date items from my stall. And he knew we had 18 tons of rice about to arrive, and he said to me, Tracy, you better come up with a plan here, because I am not eating 18 tons of rice. He has eaten an awful lot of it in his time, but that's where the idea of the 90 kilo challenge came from, linked to the amount that a farmer said if he sold 90 kilos, the equivalent of 90 kilos, because he actually has to sell paddy rice, not finished rice, but the equivalent of 90 kilos of finished rice, that would enable him or her to make a significant difference to his livelihood, and as an example, would be able to send a child to secondary school for a year. It isn't, we're quite careful, particularly in the more recent years, not to say this sends a child to secondary school, because obviously the farmers don't all have children at secondary school age, or may have other more pressing things to do with the funding. And this is trade and not charity. So it is about providing the farmer with an income that enables them to send the child to secondary school for a year in a country where less than 1 in 3 children have that opportunity. We also have done, over the years, people have given us charitable support, and we have then provided bursaries for children who maybe are orphans or similar. And that has, I think, one of those children has gone on to university. Is that right, Howard? Maybe more than one now, but
it's more than one. Because at the moment we have 3 in university, but in the past, 3 also graduated. So it is not only about secondary education, but we are also having graduates now.
Yeah, which is fantastic. Just to hear about the difference that us eating a different type of rice makes, I think is, I mean, it's one of the things that's always struck me about Fairtrade. Before I worked in this, I worked for a number of years for Shared Interest, who some of you will be aware of as a Fairtrade finance organisation. And through that, I had the opportunity to go to West Africa. And the first time, that was one of the first times, and probably the most extreme time that I'd experienced poverty in Africa. And I think, had I not been involved in a Fairtrade organisation and could see the difference that that was making, I think I would have just found it so overwhelming and so hard to have any idea what you could possibly do to make a difference, that I think I would have probably come back and just closed my eyes to it and thought, this is too difficult. Whereas because of Fairtrade, there is something really easy we can do day in, day out to make a difference. It might not make a huge difference, it might, but just by choosing a different brand of rice, tea, coffee, chocolate, etc., we can actually make a difference. I'm going to share just a couple of slides from the end of my presentation that show some of what we're doing on Christmas products, our Christmas range, and then we'll open up to questions for Howard. So if this is going to behave, which right now, of course it's not. There we go. So quite a few of you, I mean, hopefully quite a few of you have actually seen this leaflet because it was issued probably 2 weeks ago now. But as normal, we are doing a variety of pre-assembled gift packs where you can order specified products into a gift pack, like the top left here. We also do offer the empty boxes. So if people want to order them and then let their customers in store or on their stalls choose what they put in, that's also available. Bottom left is an example of beer bread. Beer bread has been a huge success for us over the last 5 years or so. We have pre-sold quite a lot of this year's stock of beer bread, more than we'd anticipated, and that does mean that we don't have masses available this year, and on some lines we will run out quite quickly. Overall, that's a good thing, but it does mean if you want beer bread this year for your stall or your shop, it would be sensible to get in with an order quicker than has been the case in recent years. We have just launched a fairly small selection from Swazi Candles. Obviously, we are mainly about food. We have been, over recent years, exclusively about food. We weren't back in 2009-10, and then we decided to home in on food. Because we were bringing products in from Eswatini, the country, we brought in a batch of candles from Swazi Candles, who are very close to Eswatini Kitchen, and we're able to consolidate the container there. If they sell, then we'll carry on buying from them. If they don't, then I guess we won't. We also have a lot of seasonal lines from some of our friends, the likes of Divine Chocolates, tasting sets, not directly a Christmas line, but I certainly find on my stall they sell well at Christmas. And we will be getting products back in from Alta Mercato, which is the bottom right here. They seem to do Christmas really a lot later than us in Italy. I don't really know why, but we're not going to get those products until certainly into October, possibly even late October, and it does include some advent calendars. So watch this space, but they're not here yet, and they won't be for a few weeks yet. And then in the middle there at the bottom is the gift pack of hot sauces from Akuva. On our website, you'll also find products from Namaste, bowls, mugs, etc. And some of you will have seen these new products that we've launched. Both of these lines, all the profit that we make on them will support our food bank fund. So we are essentially not making any profit ourselves, and we're putting that into donating food to food poverty organisations like Fair Share and other local ones. We also have a recipe book, which was funded through the Scottish Episcopal Church and has a little bit of producer information from initially, I mean, it was focused on rice initially. It does have other producers and products in it as well. And a True Origin tote bag, Fairtrade cotton, obviously. And in fact, I'm actually holding one of the bamboo pens here. So I think probably, well, I'll show you this slide. Most of you will be aware that we've, in conjunction with Transform Trade, have relaunched Tradecraft Tea, a refreshed version of that. We are looking at whether to launch a loose leaf tea version. So far, I'm not really getting a sense that there's enough demand, but if you're interested, please put something in the chat and say you're interested, or thumbs up. Thank you, Rosemary. We know there is some interest, but it will cost us a fair bit to originate the boxes and so on. So we need to know that there's going to be a decent bit of demand. That slide was there to show you all the other new products that we've recently launched, like biscuits, mustards, new spices, new chutneys, new herbal teas, etc. And we have a container that's leaving Eswatini, I think this week, which we expect to have the long-awaited return of kumquat marmalade and kumquat pickle, which I'm not sure if we've done the kumquat pickle before, but kumquat marmalade will be coming back, I guess, maybe 6-8 weeks time by the time it gets here. If there's other things you'd like us to try and introduce, we're really keen to hear from you on that. Please be patient. It does take quite a long time from the point of hearing that somebody would like something to the point of actually being able to launch it. I want to stop there and open up to questions. I don't know if anyone's put questions at all in the chat function. I think I did see one right early on about terraces and whether you operate with terraces, but mainly, obviously, this is questions for Howard, but if there are questions about either BAFS or True Origin, then Joanna and I can try and answer those. But yeah, I don't know. Are there questions in the... So the question from Susan was, we're used to seeing terraced paddy fields. What are the fields like in Malawi? So Howard, could you explain, because it's not really paddy fields, is it, in Malawi? It's different. And I think it's less climate of an issue, less of an issue from the climate point of view. Am I right in terms of like carbon emissions and so on? I'm not completely sure on that one. I've heard it and then I've never really spent too long investigating it. But maybe just describe what the fields look like.
The fields look like what we see on the hills where you have stone fences. Most of the fields have got stone walls, but in our case, they are just small demarcations. What it means is each farmer belongs to a village, and his land is allocated to him or her by a village headman. So we have got land where we farm, which is allocated to different farmers. Each farmer has not more than 2 acres of land. So it's just land with very small demarcations in the form of boxes. It's not like the vast paddy areas that we see in Asia, no. Yeah.
I'm gonna answer a question that I've just spotted in the chat around 3 kilo bags, and indeed to some extent 1 kilo bags. We miss the 3 kilo bags as well. Our bagger stopped bagging that size for other organizations. So we would have had to have bought the plastic film ourselves for the 3 kilos. And we'd have had to have bought the minimum run from the people that make the film for the bags would have taken us approximately 19 years to use up. We cannot justify that. Apart from anything else, it would have probably degraded before 19 years is up. So although I'm absolutely with you that in many ways, the plastic I don't like the fact that there's lots of plastic around a 500-gram bag. It is what we've been advised is what retail shops want rather than kilos. Lots of people apparently don't buy more than 500 grams of rice. I think there is maybe a generation of us that do, because we buy genuine rice and cook genuine rice. And if you've got a family, that sort of quantity is quite small. The really good thing since we introduced the 500-gram bags is that those are recyclable plastic, which none of the previous bags were recyclable. So one of the big things we looked at was what was the right thing to move it into, because when we got the Best Buy award for the rice, which was the ethical consumer, one of the only things they picked us up on was the packaging. And we looked at a variety of options. We looked at the whole compostable bag, and we had quite strong feedback, actually, amongst other people from our WFTO auditor, who is an eco auditor in her main job, that said, don't go that way, because if you're buying a plant-based bag, that's someone somewhere is growing that plant on land that could be used for food somewhere. Also, compostable bags and long life products aren't a good idea because they will compost before the life of the product has got there. So we would have had rice sitting in our warehouse, potentially not with a bag around it anymore if it had been sitting there for a while. So it is recyclable plastic, not compostable, etc. The 500 grams versus the kilo more of a challenge? I, again, would quite like the kilo, but when we had both, they were just fighting each other for market, and we can't afford to have both, basically. And since some of our bigger customers want the 500-gram bag, that's what we're with at the moment. It's also massively expensive to originate new packaging. So even just to say we want the equivalent in 1 kilos would cost us thousands in the origination of that process, and we don't make enough money to do that, basically. Vicky's asking support, Howard, the farmers who lost crops that we heard about in the video, is there support for them? How does the community work with farmers that are impacted by that sort of thing? Or does it impact everybody?
If the crops which have been destroyed have affected many households, then the issue is reported to the governments through the Ministry of Agriculture, and in most cases, the government will have a list of people to supply them with supplementary food. But it will only take maybe 2-3 months, because in most of the government programs are politicized. But as Kasfa, through NASFAM, what we do is we have a grain bank. So NASFAM provides to its associations some money to buy maize, which is a staple food, and put it in a grain bank. When we have such situations, we also provide food to our members, but only those who have been dearly affected by the climate change issues, such as droughts and floods. We do that. Yeah.
Howard, what sort of quantity of rice does an average farmer grow? I realise there probably isn't actually an average farmer, but people will have varying quantities of land and size of families, for that matter, working on the land. But is there an average amount that a farmer would grow in a season?
Yes, especially I can give you an amount in an average amount for Kilombero. An average amount would be 1,500 metric tons per farmer. Who belongs to the
Is that
association.
paddy rice?
Yes, paddy rice.
And how much do we lose? Is it about half of it that gets lost weight-wise by the time you create end rice? Not quite that much?
Not quite that much. No.
Yeah. Wendy is asking, is the challenge just a case of selling 90 kilos of rice? I mean, sort of yes, and sort of no. I mean, you can undertake the challenge, but and if you order it as 90, or we do a 45 kilo version that's a half challenge, you get access to materials. So if you're a church, you can have there's a supporting liturgy, but there's also supporting sort of sermon ideas and so on in a resource pack. If you're doing it through schools, then you get a pack that's got lesson plans and activity plans that are related to the curriculum. But you can just buy, over the course of a season, enough rice to get to 90 and know that that's what you've done, if that's better for you. The 500, we now sell it as 90 or 180 500-gram bags. So obviously it is still 90 kilos or 45 kilos. So yeah, I see quite a lot of people asking questions about paddy rice. It is just the rice as harvested before it's processed. There is quite a lot of processing that happens in Malawi before the rice is exported to get it to a fit state to export. There is also quite a lot of quite expensive processing that happens in the UK before we can bag the rice as fit for UK food standards. It has to go through a number of checks that it hasn't got any foreign bodies in, but also human fumigation and so on to make sure that it is definitely okay for our food standards. And then it comes up, so that happens in Cambridgeshire, and then it comes up to Scotland and gets bagged in Scotland and transferred to our warehouse, or stored in our warehouse in 1-ton sacks until we need to bag it. So those of you that have seen any of the photos from the open warehouse we did on Saturday will have seen massive blue sacks in the background. That's a ton of rice that we are storing as a ton of rice. I think there was another question. Was it Joanna? I think you were asking about how far fields are from where the farmers live, and have farmers lost homes to flooding as well as fields?
On average, most of the fields would be on average about between 500 and a kilometer away from the homes. That is on average. But there are fields which are about 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers away from the fields. And if we talk about losing homes due to flooding, we are from different areas. The people who are very close to the lake, it's almost every year they suffer from floods. But it's difficult for them to leave the area to go and settle somewhere else because there is not enough land for farming. So what they do is, after the floods, they reconstruct their homes and live there. But like in most areas of Kaporo smallholder farmers, I think the effect on homes being destroyed by water would be between 10 and 20%, not much, especially on homes, as it is done on fields.
I'm not aware that there are other questions in the chat. I'm not sure if I've caught them all, but if you've got a question and either that's in the chat or isn't, and that you'd like to ask, please do. Yes, Gail, I think they are chocolate advent calendars that are coming. I'm pretty certain it's panettone type things and chocolate advent calendars. Rosemary's asking about the sugar and tea producers in Malawi, and do they have separate associations? Certainly separate from Kasfa. I think there are some other products, so definitely some other products sold through NASFAM, but I'm not sure that there's tea or sugar sold through NASFAM. Do you know, Howard?
No, we don't have any sugarcane association in NASFAM.
So I think Kasantula, which is one of the well-known Fairtrade sugar producers, is a separate cooperative.
It's a separate cooperative on this one, yes.
Yeah.
But we have associations which make cooking oil. There are associations which grow nuts, beans, chilies.
We have looked at other products to import from NASFAM. Really quite early on in Just Trading Scotland's life, we did import various nuts. Some of you might remember the macadamia nuts. They were really nice. I'm not quite sure what happened that meant that we stopped importing those, and maybe we should look at them again at some point. We also had a couple of fairly disastrous attempts at importing both peanuts and coffee. The coffee, I mean, some of you will remember sort of campaign coffee from many, many, many years ago. I don't. I'm actually just a little bit too young for that. But the stuff we imported from Malawi was worse than the reputation that campaign coffee had. Definitely not sellable. The peanuts they had to be destroyed. They were not fit for human consumption. So quite an expensive experiment that we would, I mean, we will look at some of these things again, but obviously we need to do things that are both beneficial to the farmers and work commercially for us.
I think you have to engage Betty.
Betty, yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, over the coming months as a board, we're looking at what the next products and the next 5 years of strategy for True Origin will look like. And we know we need to keep looking at new products. We know we need to keep looking where we can at value-added products. I mean, obviously the rice is not a good example from that point of view, but most of our other products are where the value is added in country. So yes. Any other questions? I'm happy to wind up there, but I'm also happy to carry on if there are questions. I'm not seeing anything else either in terms of people putting their hands up or in the chat. Oh, Susan.
Just to say that it is really helpful to get an understanding of the bigger picture, because it's when we're trying to sell to people, we need to know more sometimes to explain it. And somebody was talking just today about it being a good project for people, but they obviously had no clue what Fairtrade was about, or the sort of things that, Howard, you have described and helped us so clearly to understand. So thank you. I think this has really been helpful. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you. I think, I mean, that it is something that we're aware as True Origin. We haven't done an awful lot of this sort of thing, and definitely value your feedback, either through just your existing contacts at True Origin or back to BAFTs as to how useful you found it, and whether something similar with other producers would be useful. Obviously, we're doing this right now because Howard's in the UK, but actually because of Zoom, it doesn't have to be when a producer's in the UK. We have done things a little bit like this, particularly with some of the producers that are producer partners that have good internet connections. We've done it with the likes of Meru Herbs, and it's worked really well. So we could do that again, but with some of our producer partners. if that would be useful. Rosemary.
I find it very helpful to see an actual film, you know, being able to see the effect of losses of crops, and then if that's also fully explained about the impact, you know, that makes, and therefore what they're working against, and how irrigation and belonging to fair trade associations, put that broadly, you know, has actually helped, and how they're working on mitigation and so on, you know, with the briquettes. The films like that are very helpful. So if they went with a little bit of explanation, that'd be really, really helpful. Yeah.
I think that film's on, I think it's on the BAF's website. It's actually it's the second half of a film that starts with input from Eswatini Kitchen and the Women Farmer Foundation in Swaziland, what's now Eswatini.
Thank you.
So I started it halfway through, which obviously you could if you were showing it to somebody, or you could show the whole bit that includes the footage from Eswatini. We worked through BAFT, Vicky and I, who's on the call, worked to try and get a variety of different producer voices into the BAFT conference this year that was telling people about the actual impacts of climate change. And I think you're right that, you know, it's lovely to hear lots of glossy information about how fair trade has made a difference, but actually sometimes what you need is to see it, and to see the challenges.
And I also think there's some solidarity between farmers from different countries, because in this country we're only producing 50% of our food, and the farmers in our region, some of them are wiped out this year and have ceased farming because they couldn't afford to replant. So the average, you know, early planted wheat losses were a third over the whole of this county. So, you know, and farmers understand that. They understand too that in a country like Malawi, they have nothing to fall back on.
Yeah,
whereas
I think,
here,
I mean, I wasn't, you know, there
on
Saturday, but Howard was speaking at the Scottish Fair Trade Campaigner Day, and I believe that the conversation was a combined one with a farmer from Scotland. Is that right, Howard? Karina?
Yes.
Help me out. Sorry,
yes,
I wasn't there.
Say, yes, it was a farmer from Fife, and that bit was definitely recorded. So you should be able to see that if you go to the Scottish. I don't think it's quite up yet, but the new sort of Scottish Fair Trade website will have that recording of a Scottish farmer and Howard having a conversation. So that bit you'll be able to see that as well.
Yes. And also some of the fair trade farmers in other countries have mitigated climate change through all sorts of other methods. But the briquettes example is fantastic, because tree planting is the thing that we all need, including here.
But I think also sometimes we get really keen on tree planting and don't actually stop and think about what we can do to avoid cutting them down.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. But it stops a lot of the flooding.
Yeah, absolutely. Joanna, do you want to wrap up for us?
Yes.
Any final comments?
Absolutely. So I think it's been a really interesting evening, and thanks so much to both Tracy and Howard for sharing the stories. I think we all feel like we're much more connected to the Kilombero rice that we sell, and we'll do a better job selling it to customers in the future because of this. So thank you so much to everybody who's come along, and I hope to see you again when we'll do one of these in the future, and keep sharing those stories. And happy Fairtrade Fortnight, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, folks.